Tommy, Rita is mind controlling you! I think you two should be more concerned about other things. Like making me a sandwich! Ha ha! Oh man, that's not very considerate of evolving gender roles. Red Ranger, how did you get a dragon shield without me losing my powers? Anything is possible when you're not sexist! No! No! Oh, hi, perfectly mature adult bento fire here. Let's talk about Power Rangers. Yes. Power Rangers, or more specifically the Mighty Morphin incarnation of the team, was a live-action TV show that started back in 1993 on Fox Kids. The show revolved around 5, and later 6, teenagers who were chosen by an alien being named Zordon to fight an evil sorceress named Rita Repulsa. To do this, Zordon gave them morphers with power coins that drew on the power of the dinosaurs to turn them into spandex-clad superheroes. Mighty Morphin has everything you need for an iconic, cheesy show if you think about it. Individual weapons that can combine into a mega weapon, a giant combiner robot with an awesome, blocky design that carries a giant sword, 2 other giant robots that can combine with the main one to form an even more powerful robot, and of course, classic villain designs. Well, 4 at least. I forget who these guys even are half the time. Of course, I would be remiss not to mention that Power Rangers famously uses footage from Super Sentai, a long-running series in Japan. I don't watch Sentai because I don't do well with subtitles, but Gokaiger and Tokyuger hold my interest. And I do need to find out the backstory behind my waifu eventually. Anyway, I get into the various details about things like the characters and their very obvious sexual tension, but this is already going a bit too long, so let's cut to the chase. After RPM, Power Rangers was dead. Disney, who owned the franchise at the time, didn't want to make any more seasons, but Bandai, who made the toys at the time, still wanted to make toys for Power Rangers. So, what did Disney do? Why, they George Lucas MMPR, of course! Specifically, they took 32 of the original 60 episodes of the first season and applied new comic book aesthetics to things. Like, that's pretty much all they did. Just played MMPR and occasionally stuck something in there. And I do mean occasionally. There are long stretches of time where the episode just sort of plays like normal, and you briefly forget that you're watching the reversion. Then BAM! It's right in your face. It's so bizarre that it actually kind of sucks the joy out of moments. Like, take this last scene from the last part of Green with Evil. The Rangers morph and start doing poses with their dialogue. That description doesn't really do the scene much justice, but it's a moment of unity after a rough 5-parter, as a new member joins the team. The reversion, however? Boom! Bish! Pow! Wham! Just interrupting the flow all over. Overall, MMPR 2010 the show is pretty forgettable. So let's talk about the toys. The toys that are very hard to get a hold of. Seriously, I had to do some major hunting to get together what I managed to. Which is weird when you consider that people don't really think too highly of this line, but we will discuss that a bit later. For now though, let's take a look at the packaging that I couldn't even get a physical sample of. Well, like many MMPR products, the packaging is a dark green with lighter green lightning illuminating it. Below the legal info at the top is some CGI of the Rangers that seems to have originated from MMPR 2010, and it was still used in some marketing afterwards. They're on the Netflix cover, the packaging for Legacy Morphers has them, and it seems to have influenced this disguised Halloween mask. Weird. This bubble is mostly round, which seems to be one of the many standards for 3 3/4 inch figures, and they have the 2010 MMPR logo stamped on the top, along with some info on the figure at the bottom. Behind the figure seems to be that one glass circle that the original lightning bolt always seemed to hit, which is odd since the 2010 version omits it. On the back is your basic look at the figure, its accessories, and an advertisement for the figure range. Anyway, on to the figures. Let's start with a basic example of a figure with this line. Who isn't even from this line? Yeah, my standard Red Ranger and my White Ranger are the 2013 Metallic Force re-releases. This does admittedly give me 2 Red Rangers, but the Metallic Red Ranger was $5 complete, versus $20 for any of the other Rangers. And man, I sure did miss out on those random gliders that have red LEDs like a bootleg action figure. Anyway, the head sculpt is pretty good. In fact, almost all of the Rangers' head sculpts are pretty great. Very accurate on that part. Heck, I dare say that the Red Ranger sculpt here is more accurate than on the Legacy figure they made later. Seriously, what was up with that head sculpt? Anyway, his body is pretty swole. This is a massive point used against the line, the proportions. To be honest, beyond the hands and feet, this is mostly a personal preference, since some people want less muscle and more accuracy to the Sentai. I personally don't mind the muscles though. By the way, on that note, we're only using Bandai standards in this video for the sake of fairness. Anyway, the hands and feet are massive, and I think I know why. Back when 3 3/4 inch lines were everywhere after Marvel Universe got awesome, some lines felt the need to make bigger hands and feet. I'm guessing to make them more stable in both standing and holding accessories. Those who went on long enough eventually stopped it, but it did happen. At the very least, this isn't too obvious when you pose them. The Morpher's detailed... okay, I guess. It lacks specific details, but it only lacks the black bolts and basic details. So I guess it's Season 1 accurate. For Articulation, he has a ball-jointed head, hinged shoulders, bends at the elbows, rotation at the gloves, hinges at the hips, bends at the knees, and rotation at the boots. Okay, so pretty decent articulation, but some mid-arm swivels and a waist rotation would really help it. It's especially obvious on the Dragon Shield figures, since the shield greatly restricts the shoulder hinges. By the way, my armored Red Ranger is lacking the armbands that all the other armored characters have in this line. I'm not mad, just noting it. Anyway, the female mold is pretty good. The odd proportions only really come on the hands and possibly the feet, and even then it's less obvious than the male figure. Other than that, it's pretty standard superhero proportions. She also has some fabric creasing detail that the male body didn't have, which is kinda weird. Interestingly enough, I also got a 5POA Pink Ranger with her, and I noticed that they don't have the messed up proportions. These figures seem more aimed at the spandex accuracy crowd, though you do sacrifice paint apps for that. More on that later though. Unlike the standard figures, the 5POA figure's head is not compatible with the other bodies. Heck, the standard figures can swap heads without any loss of proportions, so that's great for customs. One last thing to note is that besides the aforementioned glider, all of the Rangers came with a weapon and a blade blaster. The sculpt on the blade blaster is pretty good, though the eyes are missing. And the weapons are pretty good too. I think that they should have at least been molded in more properly colored plastic, but they're not that hard to paint. At least they all came with their weapons, but you couldn't have a power blaster unless you bought a putty patroller. That figure also includes the Thunder Slinger things that was the plot of one episode and then disappeared. Good idea to include those with an army builder, but not as much on the power blaster. Scale-wise, these guys are closer to the larger size of 3 3/4 inch, with the Red Ranger being just a hair shorter than my MU Daredevil. So overall, we're doing pretty fine with figures. Some odd proportions here and there, yes, but overall pretty good. But this line has a serious problem with paint. Okay, so our standard Rangers are pretty good on paint. The whites are white, the colors are where they should be, and the only details missing are the ones you wouldn't get on any standard retail figure. But some of the figures changed that. One example is figures with the Dragon Shield. Now, the Green Ranger is fine, save for the lack of detail on the Morpher. This was fixed on a metallic version for STCC 2013, where you got the red ring, along with a fully painted Dragon Dagger, which is the only time we ever got fully painted weapons in this line. Anyway, any other character with the Dragon Shield isn't so lucky, since they not only get the less detailed Morpher, but the back of the belt isn't painted either. This is especially strange, since a made-up variation of the Green Ranger had a ton of paint, and it went all the way to the back. Also, remember the 5POA figures I briefly mentioned? Well, they're kinda cheap from the front already, but if you turn them around, you can see that they stopped painting halfway through it. Literally halfway! On the side that you wouldn't be able to see outside the packaging. How cheap and scummy do you have to be to pull a trick like that? Regardless, that's only the tip of the iceberg. Ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you the White Ranger. The White Ranger is possibly the weirdest figure in this entire line. When you analyze him, at least. Alright, for sculpt, he's mostly good, having the typical level of detail we've come to expect from this line. But then you notice the fabric sculpting that none of the other male figures had, his oddly prominent abs, oh baby, and his oddly cartoony head sculpt. Like, they went through the entire line with mostly realistic helmet sculpts, then they just kinda made this guy stand out from everyone else. Appropriate given his adaptation history, I suppose. The weirdness doesn't end with the sculpting though. As you may have noticed, I'm using the Metallic Force re-release of the White Ranger. That's because the original release was put out in low quantities as the line ended, and thus became rare. The cheapest I've ever seen it is about $30 loose. Anyway, most of the paint scheme is followed with the Metallic Force re-release, but check out the back of the belt. Notice how it's painted? Yeah, on the original release, it was not. So like, this version has more paint by default due to the metallic business, yet it still manages to add in a detail that was originally missing. It's not like he's missing any accessories either. Despite the Red Ranger omitting it, they included the White Tiger coin with this version, and even added a Megaforce card. My only guess for this is that the original's lack of paint was a mistake that they corrected for the later version. Kinda like the Marvel Universe Miles Morales. But it's weird that they didn't save a penny here. Saba is also a weird point. On both releases he's painted silver, but if you look at the peg that attaches him to the figure, he's made out of white plastic. So they intentionally spent money making him look less accurate. What? I guess I should also note that the White Ranger also showcases the need for extra joints I mentioned earlier. There are a lot of iconic White Ranger poses this guy could do with those joints, but the restrictions mean that I can't even get close enough. At this point, you can probably see the downsides to a lot of these figures. A lot of people look back at this line in disgust compared to what came later. So let's take a look at one example of what came later. A comparable example at least. Let's take a look at the 5-inch action hero. We're only going to go by the Green Ranger for the sake of simple comparison, so let's get started. The head sculpt is fine, but the mouth looks less sharp than the 2010 figures. Could just be an issue on this one figure though. Points have to be docked immediately for head articulation, however. You see, instead of that wonderful ball joint the 2010 figures have that allowed them to stretch the limits of the head articulation and allowed the neck to look more natural when turned, they made the head a strict swivel at the base of the neck. Again, might just be a thing on this figure, but that's a step back. The body looks fine for the most part, and they actually have the white parts of the outfit present, whereas on the 2010 figure where they're absent. I like the overall Morpher sculpt on the 2010 figure better. Like, yeah, it doesn't have the coin sculpt like the action hero, but I like the more thick Morpher. Makes it feel more like it's a Morpher inside of a holster, instead of it just being a belt buckle. The Dragon Shield is better in sculpt and function on the action hero, since it's more accurate and made of rubber as to not restrict the arms. I wouldn't advise having it bent long term though. 2010's paint wins though. The only detail advantage that the action hero has over the 2010 figure is a small bit of sculpting on the gloves. But I think all but my 2010 Dragon Shield Rangers have a much more important detail present. The golden armbands. Yet somehow Bandai made this entire figure, but purposely left out the armbands. And when they did eventually add them, they were just paint, versus the sculpting that the 2010 figures have. Add on to that the fact that they sculpted the inside of the 2010 figure's hands, and you have a winner for detail. Something is also bothering me proportionally about the action hero. I know that's a weird thing to mention in a video about the 2010 line, but those aren't as bothersome in a pose. The more I pose the action hero though, the more something feels off. Wait a minute. I know why! It's because his lower arms are too small. Seriously, look at that. He's got these massive biceps, and his arms go all tiny. Why are they so small? It can't be for articulation, because the 2010 figures have meaty arms all around, and only lose a tiny fraction of bend. This one weird element throws the entire figure off. Now that is bad. Also, they commit the sin that is pre-bending his ankle, so you always have to put him in a weird stance in order to stand. His knee joints are also scarily thin. This is the type of crap that makes me worry about children breaking him during play. The knee joints on the 2010 figures are actually thicker. Beyond the knees, both of these figures are pretty solid and definitely made for children to play with. The only articulation difference between the elbows and the head are the Green Ranger's legs are able to go up higher. But good luck posing him standing with that leg up. Accessories are pretty good between the two of them. The action hero Dragon Dagger can even be used by the 2010 figures, and the reverse can be said about the 2010 Blade Blaster. The only problem is that the Dragon Dagger is way too rubbery. Like, every time I stick it in one of his hands, I worry about breaking it. The 2010 line has much better plastic. You still have to do some finagling to get them into their hands, but it's not as bad. So yeah, the action hero is good, but to be honest, there are more disadvantages compared to the 2010 figures than actual improvements. Yet, people like the action heroes better. I wonder why that... It's because they're bigger, isn't it? Yeah, that's basically what it is. But hey, let's take a look at variety, shall we? What do we got? Well, our villains are... basic, I guess. We have Goldar, Lord Zed, and a Putty Patroller. Which is a decent start, but Rita got delayed all the way into the Samurai line. But hey, at least she was released, right? Most other figures are just standard Ranger releases, transparent Ranger releases, Dragon Shield Ranger releases, and... whatever this is. But hey, we've got made-up vehicles galore here! Oh yeah, and I guess the Megazord's pretty prominent, as this was a debut of the Zord Builder line, and set the basis for the later Legacy line of Zords. But I don't know enough about Combiner robots to properly review that, so I'll leave it to the professionals on that one. The Legacy Megazord also reused that mold, so those reviews work too. Now, let's talk about roleplay items. Alright, for reference, your basic Power Rangers roleplay line should include masks, weapons, and morphers. One of these is notably absent. We're alright for weapons. We have a miniature Blade Blaster. Like a fully functional Blade Blaster, but it's smaller for some reason. If you're gonna make a new mold anyway, why not just make a full-sized one? I mean, they made a Dragon Dagger that's close to full size. It's just a little tubby and... The Dragon Dagger? They turned into one of these. Okay, so we've got weapons, few as they are, but what about masks? We've just got one in the actual line. In this training set. Seriously, look at how much of this kid's face is exposed by that thing. What's even the point with that much of your face on display? It also has a cheap Blade Blaster, a hollow Power Sword, and a Morpher. It seems to be a bit more of a launcher than anything. Like, they put in a hinge for the handle and everything, but it's not a proper Morpher. Yet, for some reason, this entire line skipped the Morpher. You know, that thing that's right there on their belts? That thing? They skipped it! Seriously, would it have been so hard to make a Morpher with just a Tyrannosaurus coin and just include the other ones with the figures? It wouldn't have even been that hard, because you're already including tiny coins inside of the packaging. For a tiny Morpher you include with a pink and a yellow Ranger figure. Why do you tease the Morpher but not deliver? Heck, the 2017 movie didn't even use the Morpher, but they still crapped one out. Why couldn't you? But hey, this line still gave us the first modern depictions of a full MMPR team, and even paved the way for Bandai's last 8 years with the license. Crappy as they may seem in hindsight. So, overall, MMPR 2010 the show was forgettable. But the toy line was actually pretty alright. If you're a strictly 3 3/4 inch guy like I am, I definitely recommend it. I'm Bento of Fire, and may the power protect you. Are you a fan? No, quite the opposite, in fact. So, like, you're just a normal human being? What? No, I'm your nemesis. The one who shall make your existence hell and spell out your demise. Santa Claus? What? You know, Santa Claus. I caught him on his bootlegging a few years ago, and he's had it out for me ever since. In fact, he sent up my uncle over Christmas to kill me. You remember that, Pidgin? You have issues that you'll never live to address. Pidgin, you think you can handle this? My hands are full of parts to replace figures. Pidgin! Alright, Santa, or whoever you are, no one hurts Pidgin and gets away with it. After I put down these figures. Okay, come on! Yeah. Your form betrays you. You've never been in an actual fight, have you? Yeah, but you don't have to be so rude about it. You are disarmed. Give up, and I might spare you and your friend. Well, I would, but this is a review video with a fight scene at the end, so, Hyper Cannon! Perfect. Fire! What? Thanks for the energy. Yeah! Yeah! Fireball! Yeah! Useless toys. You thought these were a worthy defense? You're not even worth the mask on your face.